Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast, where I give you practical Stoic advice for modern times. If you'd like to see more information about this podcast, or if you'd like to see more of my free resources, just go to my website. It's risetothegoodlife.com. But for now, I really hope that you enjoy this podcast, and if you do, then I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe on iTunes and leave a positive review so that more people can have the chance to listen to this great work. Welcome to episode 2 of the Practical Stoic Podcast, and in this episode, I want to give you a bit of an overview of Stoicism. I'll give you a brief history, I'll tell you about some of the key figures, and I'll give you some examples of modern-day Stoics in the public arena today. So what is Stoicism? Well, to start with the essentials, Stoicism is a school of philosophy. And when I say school, I literally mean that when it began, it was a school. See, in ancient Greece, philosophers were some of the main teachers within the society. Parents would literally send their children, or even themselves, to a school of philosophy where they would be taught how to live in accordance with that particular philosophy. It was also the case that parents would, if need be, hire a philosopher as a personal tutor to their child. For example, Aristotle was hired by King Philip of Macedon to be the personal tutor to his son, who later became Alexander the Great. The school of Stoicism was founded by Zeno of Citium in the early 3rd century BC, and was originally taught on the stairs of the building called the Stoa Poikile, thus the name Stoicism. Zeno's father was a merchant and would often bring books to Zeno after his trips to Athens. These books were often philosophical, and this was where Zeno began his love of philosophy. Later in his life, Zeno was shipwrecked in Athens, and so he took this as an opportunity to start anew and to begin learning from the philosophers of Athens. Eventually beginning his own school, Zeno and those who followed him taught that to live a good life, one must focus heavily on virtue, which is the ultimate good, and that to have true virtue, you must set your aim at knowledge and wisdom. He also taught that a good life should be aligned with nature, and should also be free from negative emotions like hate, anger, and fear. But even though Stoicism began in Greece, it eventually found its way to Rome, where the most notable philosophers of Stoicism that we know today actually resided. So who are these philosophers? Well, there are 4 that I'd like to mention: Seneca the Younger, Musonius Rufus, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. Seneca the Younger was born around the same time as Jesus in Cordoba, a town in Roman Spain. His life is not heavily documented, however his adult years saw him become a wealthy and highly influential philosopher, statesman, investor, playwright, and advisor to the Roman Emperor Nero. Seneca was a master at the art of rhetoric, public speaking, and debate, and also spent time as a speaker in the Senate. As was and is often the case with anybody who would devote their life to politics, Seneca's life was marked with scandal. But what we see in his writings is a man who is torn between a life of philosophy and a life of ambition, 2 worlds that are difficult yet not impossible to combine without conflict. Seneca's life was at times filled with beauty and at others filled with strife. For example, in the year 41, all of Seneca's property was confiscated, and he was banished after he was accused of committing adultery with the emperor's niece. He was sent to a rocky island where he spent 8 years in exile, returning only after the emperor's new wife had convinced him to bring back Seneca so that he could tutor her son, Nero. Around 65 AD, after being accused of conspiring to kill the emperor, Seneca was sentenced to death by suicide, a fate which he met with calmness and dignity. Seneca's letters and essays show a man who was aware of his shortcomings and who was deeply dedicated to understanding the truth about what really makes people happy and what does not. His letters are personal, touching, and full of insight. At the same time that Nero was in power, Musonius Rufus was at the height of his fame as a thought leader in Rome, and was teaching Stoicism to many eager students. One of these students had the foresight to take prolific notes at his lectures, without which we would have very few records of his teachings. Musonius was a bold teacher, and he believed that a lecture should almost be painful to the student, seeing as they are there to rid themselves of negative traits and behaviors. Musonius, like Seneca, also suffered banishment, and in 65 AD he was sent away to a desolate and rocky island. Many say that this was because of Nero's jealousy about Musonius's rising fame as a philosopher. He returned home only after Nero had died, although he was exiled again later in life and died in 100 AD. Although Musonius Rufus is the least known philosopher of the four that I'm mentioning, his contributions to Stoicism cannot be overstated, one of which is his greatest student, Epictetus. Epictetus was born as a slave to a man called Epaphroditus, who at the time was administrative secretary to Nero. Seeing that Epictetus was highly intellectual and showed great talent, Epaphroditus sent him to Rome to study with Musonius Rufus, as I just mentioned, where he became an excellent student and was eventually freed from slavery after the Emperor Nero had died. Later, in 94 AD, the Emperor Domitian banished Epictetus and other philosophers out of jealousy over their rising influence among the people of Rome. Sent away to Nicopolis, Epictetus made the best of his exile by establishing a school where he spent the rest of his life living in humble circumstances and teaching the fundamentals of Stoicism to eager students. Among those who were highly influenced by the works of Epictetus was Marcus Aurelius, who studied these works as a young man. Marcus Aurelius is widely considered to be one of the 5 good Roman emperors, and also one of the great Stoic philosophers. He and his brother Lucius Verus were groomed for emperor status at a young age, although the two boys were completely different in terms of character and ability to lead. Lucius was highly indulgent in the vices, yet Marcus was focused on the study of philosophy and was dedicated to his duty as heir to the throne. Throughout his reign as emperor, the Roman Empire was struck by plague, war, and famine, yet Marcus Aurelius stayed true to his Stoic values. At one time, he even sold large portions of his furniture and precious jewelry to help the people endure the hard times and to set an example of sacrifice from the top down. Through extreme illness, war, betrayal, and hardship, Marcus Aurelius shone as a brilliant example of a person whose life was dedicated to philosophy. During his life, he wrote extensive notes on life, death, God, and philosophy, introducing the idea that death is always lingering over us, and so the only way to live a good life is to dedicate one's time only to good and agreeable causes. So these are the main Stoic philosophers, and in the future episodes I'll be sharing their words with you. If you haven't already read Stoic philosophy, then there are many books that I'd recommend to get you started. But instead of listing them all on here, I'm actually going to put a list together and put that in the show notes for this episode. And you can find that at my website, which is risetothegoodlife.com. Before I end this episode, I'd like to bring Stoicism into modern history, and just name a few people who you may know who consider themselves to be Stoics or who were greatly influenced by Stoic philosophy. Some of these people include the author and investor Tim Ferriss, bodybuilder, politician, and actor Arnold Schwarzenegger, Presidents Theodore Roosevelt, Bill Clinton, George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson, Chicago Cubs manager Joe Madden, football quarterback Tom Brady, the rappers T-Pain and Lupe Fiasco, John Steinbeck, Ralph Waldo Emerson, J.K. Rowling, Kevin Rose, Jack Dorsey, and Nelson Mandela. With a list as diverse as that, how could you not be interested in diving deeper into this incredible philosophy? Well, that's exactly what I'll be doing in the next episode when I outline what I believe are the 10 core values of Stoicism. Before I go, if you'd like more information or to see the show notes, you can head to my website. It's risetothegoodlife.com. There I have heaps of blog posts, another podcast called Searching for Good, and much more free stuff. If you would prefer to follow me on Facebook, you can find me at Daily Stoic Quotes, or just my name, Simon Drew. On my Daily Stoic Quotes page, as the name suggests, I post amazing Stoic quotes every single day. So like that if you want to be inspired by the great Stoic philosophers every day. I really hope that this episode has helped you on your rise to the good life, and I hope to have you back soon. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. I really hope that it's valuable to you, and I really hope that it helps you to live a better life. If it has been valuable to you, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and leave a positive review. If you'd like to see more free resources, just go to my website. It's risetothegoodlife.com.